So if we look from a strictly logical point of view, we can say that a stance change into a forward bow stance gives us 4 potential strikes. It gives a forward moving strike to the front using my rear arm, or it gives me a reversing strike to the rear, also with my rear arm. And it gives me the same 2 options with my right arm, my front arm in this case, right? It gives me, if I turn into the forward bow stance, it gives me the opportunity for a forward moving strike to the rear, however. Or it also provides me the opportunity to use a reversing strike, like a hook, like a claw or a rip, right, to the front. Right? There's these 4 different options of striking that I have now just by one rotation into the forward bow stance. Not even rotating back yet, just rotating into the forward bow stance. Okay? And so this also starts shedding a little bit more light on why there are so many extensions in the system. Because all these options have to be covered and shown. Right? So just the ones that I mentioned right now, you can see how they are on different belt levels already tucked in different places, right? Because they provide a logical progression of more advanced methods of striking, and more striking happening simultaneously. Okay. So now let's talk about power. Okay? Really, what we kind of mentioned already, that the rotation or the motion of the body can contribute to the power of your hand strikes, right, and your kicks as well. But really, what we should be aware of is that the strikes in Kenpo are extremely relaxed. That's how they can be so lightning fast. But upon impact, when you're making contact, the whole body tenses up and participates in that action. So you can have a very, very relaxed strike. But then once you make contact, the whole body is in there, okay, and you're hitting with the full mass of your body. That is your goal. That is your goal. That takes a lot of time to practice. That probably takes the most time in terms of coordination to really master. Okay? So now let's take a look at how this is like at different depths of penetration. Okay? So that we can get an idea of how much power is actually being generated here, right? Now when we work with a partner in class, we usually use touch contact, right? We don't want to hurt each other, right? And the partner is really the partner's responsibility to make sure they react according to what we are doing, right? So they have to respect those strikes, and they have to bend and twist according to what we're hitting them, right? Now if we go to a little bit more depth of penetration in our strike, right? We're going to show it here on the bag first, right? We strike a bag, and now we're going to go about 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch into the target. Now if we're doing this on a person, and we're going to do it with a palm strike to the chest, so that way we don't, have any bad injuries here, because, the knuckles of the fist is very painful. So with just that little bit of a depth of penetration, you can already see that's a pretty forceful strike, right? And that definitely gives you a lot of respect. So let's alter this now, and again against the bag first, let's go to about 1/4 inch to 1/2 an inch to maybe 3/4 of an inch. We're approximating that. It's probably not totally accurate about how deep that is, but we're going to go a little further now. And again, you notice how easy this is to execute on the bag. This is not full power yet, not by a long shot. Right? We're barely penetrating into this bag, not even an inch. Let's do that on the person to see how it is. Right?
Okay, you're gonna break my sternum.
And we're starting to have difficulties finding volunteers. This is quite painful. A strike at this velocity going through about 3/4 of an inch or so. Right? Now look, let's go back to the bag and look at how this looks at the bag. Let's go in about 3 inches into this bag. Right? You notice this is not a problem at all. This is very easy. A bag like this is much more unforgiving than a human body. When you pinpoint your strike, and if that was a floating rib or the solar plexus or the sternum, we just saw a moment ago the reaction when we just hit with only less than an inch of penetration. Okay? So the term depth of penetration refers to exactly what you just saw here, exactly what we were just looking at. Right? It is not the amount of power in the strike. It is how much of that power goes past the surface of the target, right? So you're not just striking to the surface, you're penetrating past the surface. Okay, and you can control how far you do that. And that is how you can control the amount of power you actually are going to deliver. Okay? But yet, if you notice, with all these strikes, the strike is relaxed. It's not muscled. When you muscle the strike, you lose most of your power because you're losing speed. Keep in mind that if you double your mass, in other words, if you become twice as big and strong, you double your power. But if you double your speed, you quadruple your power. And that is really one of the concepts that Kenpo is based on. Simply by doubling your speed, your power skyrockets. Okay? Now, we do need to realize as we go and talk, when we talk about power and when we talk about how the body is going to help us with that, we have to realize that there's 3 different ways the body can move in order to produce power. Right? We have 3 different types of what we call body momentum. That just means that the body can have 3 different things that it can do in order to help your arm strike more forcefully. Right? And that is so because we have 3 dimensions that we live in. We have height, depth, and width. Right? And by traveling through those 3 different dimensions, we get different results and we get different types of travel. If I move forward, like I'm moving towards you, I am now traveling through the dimension of depth. That is much like a car that, let's say you imagine a car crash with 2 cars hitting each other head on. Right? That would be a good example of forward momentum. Similar to a football player doing a tackle, similar to a wrecking ball hitting a building. You're getting close to the target. You're going from having a great distance from the target to closing in that distance, and then comes the impact. That's forward momentum. It doesn't matter if you're going to 12 o'clock or to 6 o'clock with it. It means you're approaching your target and you're hitting. Right? Now that is obviously very difficult. That is obviously very different from rotating in place. I can turn in place. Imagine one of the blades of a helicopter that's hitting you. Right? Well, the helicopter is not moving closer to you. Right? It's standing in place. Right? And so can we develop an incredible amount of power and force just by rotating. And that's what we discussed a moment ago, the rotation into a neutral bow, into a forward bow stance, right? There's many, many opportunities for rotational force within Kenpo techniques, right? And that means, of course, we're traveling through the dimension of width. We have width change right now when we rotate. I'm not very wide when I'm sideways. I'm very wide when I'm this way, though, right? But we're rotating in place. We're turning, right? Now, the third means of using your body momentum is simply by dropping, right? That's usually what's referred to as gravitational marriage, right? Because gravity is coming to your aid. When we were rotating in place, that was just all your own force, for the rotational force, right? When we were moving forward, for forward momentum, that was, again, you were driving that yourself. As a matter of fact, you had to overcome friction. If you know a little bit about physics, right, I had a force working against me there. Now with gravitational marriage, that's no longer the case. In gravitational marriage, I use my own force, but here I have another force that adds to that. Gravity and my own force come together, they get married, right? They join, they merge, right? So those are the 3 different means of developing power that we constantly employ in Kenpo Karate. And that's very important to understand, because all your stance changes are built in order to help you generate force using those 3 different types of body momentum. So that every strike in Kenpo employs body momentum, with the exception of maybe minor strikes. Okay, now before we go on, let's talk a little bit more about opposing forces. That's a very, very important subject, and it relates so intimately with what we've been looking at so far. It's very important to look at this. And we run into opposing forces constantly in Kenpo, constantly. And I'll explain it in quite a bit of detail. The first thing to look at is, what is opposing forces? Well, you need to understand that what you do with one side of your body has an effect on the other side of your body. Okay? So even if I'm just executing a strike, a punch with my right arm, it is not only, let's say, my right shoulder, my right hip and everything that drive that punch. What the left side of my body does while I'm throwing this right punch has a profound effect on that punch and on the speed and the power and the depth of penetration of my punch. So I can do something with my left side that either hinders that punch, or I can do something that benefits it. Right? So to get a better idea of that, we have to look at the counterbalancing quality of opposing forces. Let's look at the teeter-totter. Okay? And if we were going to put a 1,000-pound weight on one side of the teeter-totter, and we have people available to push down on the other side, or to sit on the other side. Each person is only going to weigh 100 pounds, the small people. we would need 10 people to put on the other side just to balance this out, right? And we would need another person, person number 11, to actually now be able to provide a little bit of extra weight so we can push down on that on the side in order to make the weight go up now, right? So we're pushing down.